The black limousine with the darkened windows was parked in a side alley in the middle of New York's Brooklyn borough. She looked so out of place in this place, like a flower in a garbage dump. The man in the pinstripe suit, over which he was wearing a gray coat, stopped hesitantly on the street corner. Nervously, the sweaty fingers of his right hand tightened around the handle of the black briefcase he was holding. For a few seconds his gaze remained fixed on the long limousine. The man was arguing with himself. The idea came to him to just turn around and let the matter go, but he was in far too deep for that. He dug a handkerchief out of his coat pocket and used it to wipe the sweat from his forehead. When he had put it away again, the man took courage and continued to walk quickly towards the impressive car. The back door of the limousine, facing the sidewalk, swung open on its own before the man had new doubts. Swallowing, he stopped a few meters from the open limousine door. There was no turning back now. Without looking back, he got in. As soon as the man with the briefcase sat on the leather back seat, the limousine door next to him swung shut as if by magic. "Ah, Harry, here you are at last," said a voice whose inhuman sound made everyone who heard it shudder. "My driver became doubtful as to whether you would show up, but I told him that you are a man of honor and a man of your word." The man, who was called Harry, which was his contact name but not his real name, turned around his head toward the source of the eerie voice. On the left side of the back seat sat a dark figure, his face obscured by the shadow of a low hood that was part of a cloak-like black cloth cloak. The appearance of the foreign contact was more reminiscent of one of those Nazgul ringwraiths from the Lord of the Rings films than of a human negotiating partner. Harry wondered what was really staring at him behind the shadow of the hood. "Do you have the deposit we agreed on?" said the non-human voice. Instead of answering, Harry nodded silently. He placed the briefcase on his lap, opened it, and pulled out a wad of $100 bills. "There's a total of $100,000 in $100 bills in the briefcase," Harry said. "If you complete the job successfully, there will be the remaining $400,000. In total that would be $500,000. Clicking his tongue, Harry put the wad of money back and then closed the briefcase again. "For this, Robert Gibson and his wife Ellen must die without the slightest suspicion falling on my clients." The hooded man stretched out his right arm demandingly towards the briefcase. A bony gray hand with long, tapered fingers emerged. Harry, another ice-cold shiver running down his spine, handed her the suitcase. "Don't worry. As long as your client sticks to the agreements, we will complete the job quietly," confirmed the scary hooded man as he took the briefcase. "Do not worry. Robert Gibson and his wife will be dead in 48 hours at the latest. In exactly 2 days I'll be waiting for you here at this place with the rest of the money." "In 48 hours, Harry replied with a nod. "That's fine with me." He pointed to the briefcase that the figure with the hidden face was holding in her hands. "Don't you want to count?" "That won't be necessary. I trust you." As soon as the hooded man's shrill voice said this, the limousine door next to Harry swung open. An unmistakable sign that his presence in the noble vehicle was no longer wanted. Harry got out relieved. When he tried to slam the back door with the darkened window, it swung shut on its own. Taking a deep breath, Harry walked a few steps before stopping and touching his sweaty forehead. What had just happened? Even as he was wondering this, the limousine started moving behind him. Like every year, there was a ghost train at the large public fair, as well as bumper cars, a Ferris wheel and a whole host of other attractions. Popcorn, sticky cotton candy and candied apples also made the hearts of the two Gibson children beat faster. Jamie and Kathy Gibson clearly enjoyed the trip, even though this time it wasn't with their parents but with their butler Edgar. Not only a busy schedule, but especially the increasing fame of Robert Gibson and his wife Ellen, which reached far beyond the region, the country, and even the continent, ensured that the children had to undertake the trip without parental accompaniment. Jamie and Kathy fought hard to get permission to visit the large fair, which had several thousand visitors every day. With their mother's support, they finally got their father to approve this venture, although not entirely without conditions. The children, accompanied by the butler, were followed everywhere a few meters away by two beefy-looking bodyguards. The two hulking men each carried a sharp firearm in a holster, hidden under the jackets of their dark suits. Otherwise, the small group tried to cause as little attention as possible. In recent months, the Gibsons had done their best to keep their children out of all kinds of media. The probability that they were detected was therefore rather low. Nevertheless, Robert Gibson would never have risked letting Jamie and Kathy out in public without secret security. Unlike Edgar and Kathy, 12-year-old Jamie even found a little pleasure in the fact that the two bodyguards were following them through the hustle and bustle of the fairground. Especially when the two muscle men at the ghost train got into the car behind them, in which they were extremely squashed because of their proportions, Jamie couldn't help but giggle in amusement. In his mind's eye, Jamie imagined the two men inside the haunted house being so frightened by a coffin lid suddenly popping open that they both pulled out their pistols and fired at a papier-mâché vampire. Even when nothing of the sort happened, Jamie looked over his shoulders several times in amusement, although he didn't see much more than shadows as he drove through the dark rooms. After the ghost train we went to the candy stand. Cotton candy and a large portion of popcorn made the two children's hearts beat faster. Then we went to the chain carousel, which, to Jamie's chagrin, was not climbed by her beefy minders. As inconspicuously as they could, the two bodyguards preferred to stand a short distance away from the carousel and act as if they were normal spectators. The two men, chewing gum and wearing large dark sunglasses, caught the attention of a little boy who kept staring at them with a look that expressed childlike enthusiasm combined with curiosity. Neither the staring boy nor anything else deterred the professional bodyguards. The trained gaze of her cold eyes, hidden behind sunglasses, was always focused on the surroundings of the Gibson children who were having fun on the chain carousel. Another hour passed in which Jamie and Kathy were allowed to let off steam like all the other children at the festival, accompanied by the butler. Finally, one of the bodyguards approached Edgar to remind him that the time limit Robert Gibson had set for them was coming to an end and the moment was approaching for them to leave the fair with the children. "As our companions have just made it clear to me, the time has come to leave," Edgar said to the children. "You can do one more thing before we return to the parking deck." "Oh, go ahead," Kathy immediately expressed her disappointment. "A cover-up that day would be great," replied Jamie. "I saw a shooting range near the ghost train that had some nice prizes on offer." Edgar pondered and rocked his patent leather shoes up and down. "Well, if your sister agrees to it, we can go shooting for another round." Jamie rolled his eyes, expecting that his little sister would be against his suggestion and would rather go on a carousel ride again. He was even more amazed when Kathy nodded excitedly and shouted, "Oh yes, I would like to win a new cuddly toy." The group turned back towards the ghost train. Edgar hadn't noticed the shooting range Jamie was referring to before, which seemed incredible to him the moment he saw it. A protruding green goblin face adorned the front part of the stand, which was also otherwise painted quite brightly and rivaled the appearance of the ghost train diagonally opposite. But the strangest thing was the figure in the stand, who one thought was more of a frightener from a ghost train than an advertiser of a shooting range. She wore a long black cloak that was slightly torn in some places. A huge hood covered the face of the person in the ghostly costume. Unlike the showman at the surrounding stands, she did not speak into a microphone or make any promotional gestures to attract passing fairground visitors to her stand. Rather, the faceless figure seemed to be waiting for something. In a horror film, it would have been an opportunity to drag an unsuspecting hiker into a nightmarish abyss. Here, in the middle of a busy fair, the macabre disguise, Edgar believed, was part of a show that spoke for itself and, in its own quiet way, captivated some passers-by. Jamie, who ran ahead in his euphoria to the dismay of the two bodyguards, was the first to arrive at the shooting range, where the boy immediately got a closer look. Among the prizes up for grabs, a human-sized teddy bear was one of the eye-catchers. This would be perfect for Kathy, who loved cuddly toys of all kinds, even if she already had a whole closet of them at home. However, after a short search, Jamie's attention settled on a small black box, the contents of which were a secret. This item, which seemed unspectacular at first glance, was almost hidden among the other bits and bobs on the shelf with the main prizes. Kathy and Edgar went to Jamie's side, while the two bodyguards stayed a few meters back as usual. On a white sign it was written in black decorative letters, 3 shot only $1. Edgar rummaged through the wallet he was carrying and placed 2 $1 bills on the counter. "Twice shoot, please," said the butler. An unusually long hand with very narrow, almost bony-looking fingers reached out for the banknotes. Edgar, believing that the unusual hand was part of the costume, picked up one of the air guns attached to the stand and gave it to Jamie. "They shoot for their prizes and I shoot for Kathy." After the hooded figure stepped aside to give them a clear shot, Edgar and Jamie saw what they were supposed to shoot at the back of the stand. There were a good 24 small ghost figures hanging on a device that moved back and forth and had to be shot down with rubber ammunition from the air guns. Every ghost shot meant a win. If you managed to shoot down 3 of the mini ghosts in a row, you could choose a prize from the main prizes. "Would you like to shoot in front of me?" the butler asked the boy. Jamie nodded and took a firm stance, as he had learned from his father. Just a few weeks ago, Robert Gibson, who was a passionate amateur shooter and hunter, had taken his son to test shoot at a professional shooting range where police officers and even FBI agents were trained. Jamie, who loved animals of all kinds, had always been able to avoid his father's hunting trips despite his father's urging. Due to some target practice under the critical observation of his father, Jamie knew how to handle a rifle, but in his opinion he was still far from being a good shooter. In addition, he and Robert only ever shot at stationary targets. Although these were set up at a considerable distance, the ghosts that were constantly traveling back and forth seemed to be a lot harder to hit. As Jamie had learned, he placed the rifle close to his right cheek. He tried to aim with his right eye while squeezing the lid of his left eye shut. At what seemed an opportune moment, Jamie pulled back the trigger on the range rifle. A rubber bullet was fired, flying in a straight path through the interior of the stand and missing the targeted ghost by several centimeters. Frustrated, the boy shot the little ghosts a second and third time. These 2 attempts also failed. "It was nothing," Jamie said. Annoyed, he put the shooting gallery rifle back in its holder and took another longing look at the black box that he would have loved to win. "Don't worry too much," Edgar comforted the boy. "I'm certainly not a better shot either." Edgar took a seat in front of the shooting range and reached for one of the rifles, which was fired with 3 shots. Less tense than Jamie, the butler aimed and fired 3 times in quick succession. Even though the middle shot grazed one of the mini ghosts on the side, Edgar didn't manage to score a real hit either. Shaking his head, the butler put the rifle back. "It probably wasn't meant to be," he said with a frown. "Or would you like to try your luck again?" Edgar looked at Jamie questioningly. The boy thought for a moment, but then shook his head sullenly. "I don't meet any of these stupid ghosts anyway." "Then let's go." Edgar turned to leave when he saw Kathy's disappointed face, who had been looking forward to the giant teddy. Suddenly an idea came to him. With a cautious grin on his lips, Edgar approached the 2 bodyguards. "I have a question. Maybe one of them would be willing to shoot at the ghosts at the stand. The children would be very happy if you each won one of the prizes for them." The 2 security men exchanged glances in silence under the dark lenses of their sunglasses. Finally one of them stepped forward with a nod. "Excellent," said Edgar happily. "Come with me to the shooting range."